Here at HSLDA, this past legislative season was a whirlwind.
Opposing House Bill 2827.
4,000 New Jersey students.
We sent countless emails to our members and friends. We made hundreds of posts on social media. And our lawyers flew nationwide to testify in state legislatures, to strategize with state homeschool groups, and with other homeschool advocates. A busy legislative season is exciting and chaotic. It's relentless and heart-stopping. It's hurry up and wait. It's burning the candle at both ends. And sometimes it feels like we're up against insurmountable odds. Ultimately, however, it's inspiring and rewarding work, and it's precisely what HSLDA exists to do. Now, for the first time in many years, we saw a concerted effort across the country to roll back homeschool freedom. Last year, we had warned that opponents of homeschool freedom could begin ramping up their efforts to regulate homeschooling, and this legislative season largely proved that prediction correct. The key driver of this rising opposition to homeschool freedom is a pro-authoritarian organization called the Coalition for Responsible Home Education. CRHE is an advocacy organization that focuses on shaping the future of homeschooling through legislation and the media. They have a philosophical worldview that believes that more government oversight is required to mitigate supposed risks to homeschooled children. Over the past several months, CRHE has made their voices heard in state legislatures across the country. Thankfully, however, not one of CRHE's attempts this year to regulate homeschooling has succeeded. But this group is organized, they're determined, and they are not going away. Join us as our attorneys highlight some of the challenges and adventures from this year's legislative season. We'll report on states that advanced homeschool freedom. We'll discuss nationwide trends that we are seeing. We want to help prepare you and your family if legislative battles come to your state next year.
Let's start with Oklahoma. Unlike many other states, homeschool freedom is protected in the Oklahoma State Constitution. However, even in homeschool-friendly, low-regulation states, homeschool freedom can be challenged. This year, a bill was introduced that would require families to provide a notice of intent that lists everyone involved in their homeschool program, and enabled the State Department of Education to compile a database of individuals, facilities, and organizations that perform and assist with homeschooling, pod schooling, or microschooling. Now, thankfully, the homeschool community in Oklahoma, led by Homeschool Oklahoma, has built a strong relationship with their legislators over the past 40 years, and the bill failed to make it to a committee hearing. In Kentucky, another homeschool-friendly, low-regulation state, a bill was proposed that would prevent students from being withdrawn to be homeschooled if they had as few as 6 unexcused absences or tardies. Now, often, children who are struggling in a public school environment will accrue unexcused absences as their parents try to address the problem. For example, if a child is experiencing bullying, the parents may keep that child home to prevent any further harm. According to this proposed bill, if the child had accrued enough absences, they could not be withdrawn to be homeschooled and would be forced to remain in the public school for at least 45 days. The bill also stated that any allegations of abuse or neglect would prevent a parent from withdrawing the child until the allegations were resolved. Now, HSLDA believes that child abuse and neglect should always be taken very seriously. However, a majority of reports of abuse are eventually determined to be unfounded, and restricting a family's freedom to homeschool because of unverified reports would unfairly presume guilt, circumvent due process, and unnecessarily delay homeschooling. Thanks to the efforts of HSLDA, Christian Home Educators of Kentucky, and other advocates in the state, HB 621 died in committee.
In Minnesota, language was slipped into a bill that included restrictive definitions of homeschooling and added an extensive list of offenses to the homeschool code that would disqualify parents from homeschooling. Because it was a floor amendment, homeschooling parents were denied the opportunity to testify against it. HSLDA rallied in opposition to the amendment, and we coordinated our efforts with Minnesota Association of Christian Home Educators. The bill passed the Senate, but was blocked by the House. In conference between the two chambers, the concerning language was removed.
Next, let's look at Illinois, the land of Lincoln. House Bill 2827 stirred up record-breaking opposition by attempting to significantly increase homeschool regulations in Illinois. Illinois is a state with a 75-year history of homeschool freedom, going all the way back to the landmark 1950 Illinois Supreme Court decision, People v. Levison. Now, this bill, as originally introduced, included mandatory filing of annual notice, teacher qualification requirements, student portfolio reviews, and most concerning, criminal penalties for homeschool parents who failed to comply. During the course of the legislative year, HB 2827 was amended several times, but core aspects of the bill, including the annual notification and the automatic referrals to the state attorney for criminal prosecution of families who failed to file their paperwork with the government, remained throughout. The Coalition for Responsible Home Education drafted this bill, lobbied for its passage, testified in support during committee hearings, and worked to gin up support for the bill as well. Meanwhile, HSLDA worked with Illinois Christian home educators, with homeschool parents and advocates across Illinois, with homeschool leaders in Chicago to coordinate opposition to HB 2827. Now, many people assumed that the bill would breeze through the Illinois state legislature. The bill passed through committee despite an estimated 8,000 homeschool advocates flooding the Capitol during the March 19th hearing. I was honored to join with my friend Aziza Butler, a homeschool mom from Chicago, to testify against HB 2827 in the committee hearing on March 19th. But bipartisan opposition developed as legislators from across the political spectrum realized that HB 2827 threatened emerging homeschool communities, particularly in the city of Chicago. Due to a lack of support on both sides of the aisle, HB 2827 never came up for a vote before the full Illinois House. The bill was ultimately referred back to the House Rules Committee until the end of the legislative session, resulting in a huge victory for homeschool freedom in Illinois. Now, although HB 2827 didn't make it through this legislative season, homeschooling is still very much under scrutiny in Illinois. We expect this bill or one similar to it to return next year. As a result, we at HSLDA will continue to work with ICHE and our allies across Illinois to rally support for homeschool freedom in Illinois as we anticipate further legislation down the road.
This year in Virginia, a bill was proposed to repeal the religious exemption statute. Thousands of homeschooling families across Virginia who object to public school attendance on religious grounds are freed by that statute from compulsory school attendance. I traveled to Richmond to testify against the bill alongside many other homeschoolers and homeschool advocates. The bill appeared to be influenced by CRHE's model legislation, the Make Homeschool Safe Act, and multiple CRHE representatives also testified in the committee hearing. HSLDA worked closely with the Home Educators Association of Virginia to mount opposition to the bill, encouraging homeschooling parents to call and email their legislators. Hundreds of homeschoolers rallied at the state capitol during the committee hearings, because they understood that a threat to the religious exemption statute posed a threat to homeschool freedom as a whole in Virginia. Thankfully, legislators responded to this forceful opposition, and a negative committee vote killed the bill. A New Jersey senator filed a bill that would have created a new annual notice requirement. Current New Jersey law does not require a notice, but does place a significant obligation on parents. They must provide instruction equivalent to what the child would receive in public school. HSLDA attorney Will Estrada went to Trenton to testify against the bill. Around 200 homeschoolers turned out wearing red to show their opposition. But there was no hearing after all because, thankfully, the sponsor asked the committee to not move ahead on the bill. While pro-authoritarian bills threatened freedom in some states, in other states, our work contributed to enactment of laws rolling back red tape. The Missouri legislature passed Senate Bill 63 that eliminates the Declaration of Enrollment. Although submission of the declaration has always been optional, many school districts pressure or intimidate parents into submitting it. HSLDA worked in partnership with Families for Home Education to get this done.
Wyoming became the 12th state in the country to have no notice requirements to begin homeschooling. Now, despite the legislature's friendly attitude towards homeschooling, the law in Wyoming was outdated and confusing. So this year, HSLDA and our friends at Homeschool Wyoming worked together to propose legislation that would streamline the homeschool code and remove notification requirements. Our bill sailed through the House Education Committee and the House, but then the Senate Education Committee promised to be more difficult. However, after multiple testimonies by passionate homeschool parents at the Senate Education Committee hearing on February 19th, our bill passed unanimously through committee and later through the full Wyoming Senate. I was thrilled to join my friends at Homeschool Wyoming in testifying in person despite a snowstorm before the Senate Education Committee on February 19th. Another victory that we saw was in Georgia. We partnered with Georgia Home Education Association to support a bill that secured equal access to standardized testing for homeschool students. This prevents schools from imposing special fees or requirements for homeschoolers. HSLDA deals with hundreds of homeschool discrimination cases every year. This bill, which passed through the Georgia legislature and has been signed into law due in large part to the advocacy of the Georgia Home Education Association, will help promote fair treatment of homeschool students in Georgia.
In Montana, a bill passed through the state legislature that significantly modernized the homeschool law by separating the homeschool code from other non-public schools. A distinct homeschool law minimizes the possibility that future legislation aimed at other educational programs will inadvertently affect homeschooling. Additionally, the bill specified that zoning laws, which may apply to private schools, do not apply to homeschools. It also removed provisions that required homeschoolers to provide immunization information to county officials. HSLDA worked closely with Montana Coalition of Home Educators on the bill.
We supported two bills that passed in Utah, working with the Utah Christian Homeschool Association. A bill passed that gave greater liberty to microschools and removed square footage requirements. Another bill repealed confusing language that required parents to prove they hadn't committed certain crimes.
Indiana passed a bill that makes it one of only a couple of states that officially recognize homeschool diplomas. The bill will make it much easier to resolve diploma-related issues for homeschoolers when they come up. The Indiana Association of Home Educators played a critical role in getting this bill passed. And finally, Texas passed a bill that fixed a quirk in the law. This bill leveled the playing field between homeschool and public school graduates being auto-admitted to the University of Texas. We worked alongside the Texas Homeschool Coalition to draft and usher this bill through the state legislature. Now, what if you live in a state that was relatively inactive this legislative session? As the season wore on, we noticed both troubling and encouraging trends that really anyone concerned with homeschool freedom would find interesting. State legislatures tended to be influenced by the lawmaking activities in surrounding states. This can have both positive and negative effects. For example, the battle over HB 2827 in Illinois led to a heightened interest in civic engagement among homeschooling families in neighboring Wisconsin. Now, the Wisconsin legislature was quiet this session, but homeschooling families in Wisconsin organized the first homeschool capital day that state has seen in decades. Noticing the battle taking place right next door in Illinois over HB 2827, they recognized the need to build relationships with their legislators before any potential regulatory burdens are proposed down the road.
Now, HB 2827 in Illinois highlighted the importance of welcoming new voices into the call for homeschool freedom. Victory in Illinois was won by a diverse and vibrant coalition of parents energetically defending the freedom and flexibility that homeschooling provides to them and their children. Homeschooling is growing tremendously in a wide range of demographics. This is bringing fresh and vibrant perspectives to legislative discussions. It's bridging party lines. As homeschooling continues to become more dynamic, our ability to accommodate differences and to unite in this common cause of our fundamental freedom will be crucial.
We're thrilled to see more families homeschooling, and the growth of homeschooling presents new opportunities. Many families may not be aware that less than 40 years ago, a burdensome regulatory environment made homeschooling almost impossible for the majority of families. And through many years of hard work by HSLDA and local and state organizations, homeschooling is freer than it's ever been. But maintaining that freedom requires an active and engaged homeschool community. Communicating that message to each generation of homeschooling families is crucial to defending our freedoms in the years to come.
This legislative season is evidence that the message of homeschool freedom is being heard loud and clear by the current generation of homeschooling parents. This year saw the boldest attempts at regulating homeschooling that we have seen for many years. But we also saw the homeschool community respond in record-breaking fashion. In Illinois, more than 50,000 witness slips were filed against HB 2827, and an estimated 8,000 homeschoolers flooded the Capitol in Springfield. 500 more rallied outside after the fire marshal had to close the building. The bill in Virginia also brought hundreds to rally at the Capitol in Richmond, and the governor promised to oppose the bill. Anywhere there was a significant threat to homeschool freedom, homeschooling families responded in vast numbers, and they had a tremendous impact.
However, there is still cause for concern. We believe CRHE was actively engaged with state legislators to draft and introduce many of the negative bills we saw this year. And despite failing to push through any additional regulation on homeschooling this legislative season, we anticipate the group will continue to advocate for homeschool regulation in the future. While CRHE does not purport to be anti-homeschooling, the policies that they promote are antithetical to the spirit of homeschooling. We see clear examples of this in the bills proposed this year in Illinois, Virginia, Minnesota, and New Jersey.
At HSLDA, we don't think you can have too much homeschool freedom. However, some claim that too much homeschool freedom allows for educational neglect and child abuse, and therefore, homeschooling must be regulated. But research, including 2 recent studies in the Journal of School Choice, show that homeschoolers are no more likely to be abused by parents than their peers in public schools. And crucially, there are laws already in place to prosecute educational neglect and child abuse. The vast majority of parents love their children and want to see them thrive. HSLDA believes that children thrive most when parents are free to direct their education. We also believe that regulating all parents because of the heinous actions of a few infringes on that fundamental freedom. As stated in Parnham v. JR, parents have the strongest natural interest in the well-being and flourishing of their children. The blanket assumption that children must be protected from their parents and entrusted to the state is directly in opposition to this long-held principle. More regulations will not result in more thriving children. They will ultimately do the opposite. So we will continue to oppose the calls for more homeschool regulations and fight to advance homeschool freedom wherever possible.
But we need your help. Our job at HSLDA is to see trends emerging and to mobilize quickly. But we are humbly aware that we can't defend homeschooling freedom on our own. As with every legislative session, local and state organizations were crucial this year in raising support for good bills and defending against bad bills. These organizations also spearheaded the grassroots responses that led to thousands of homeschooling families and supporters flooding state capitals. Continued coordination is key.
We're blessed to live in a country where parents can direct their children's education. That freedom exists today because early homeschoolers, state organizations, and local advocates stood firm and continue to do so. But growing calls for regulation have awakened families to the reality that these freedoms are not guaranteed. Still, there is reason for hope. The homeschool movement is stronger, more united, and more energized than ever. At HSLDA, we're committed to defending and expanding homeschool freedom so parents can focus on what matters most, helping their children thrive. We're deeply thankful for every family, every advocate, and every supporter who makes this movement possible. We're grateful to live in a nation where liberty is still cherished and where ordinary people can stand up and make a difference. Whether you're a new homeschooler or a longtime advocate, thank you. As we prepare to address the challenges and opportunities ahead, your commitment to freedom makes all the difference.